Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again. We've had these concert tickets for months. Margaret Carter's mom, yelled, her voice echoing through my hospital room. I sat there stunned, clutching my phone with trembling hands. It was Christmas Eve at Philadelphia General Hospital. Just me, my 2-year-old twins, Ben and Sophie, playing quietly in the corner, and a nurse named Lily checking my vitals. The pain in my abdomen was excruciating, like someone was twisting a knife inside me, but the look of indifference on my Margaret Carter's mom's face through the video call hurt even more. My name is Margaret Carter. I'm 33 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the afterthought in my own family, my younger sister, Rachel. The golden child could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Meanwhile, I couldn't even get them to watch their only grandchildren while I underwent emergency surgery for complications related to my late husband's death. 6 months ago, the doctors had found internal bleeding that required immediate attention. But all my parents cared about was their concert tickets and celebrating Christmas Eve with Rachel. When I finally asked for their help after exhausting all other options, my dad's response cut deeper than any surgical tool could. You're becoming a real nuisance and burden, Natasha. We're retired now. Now we deserve to enjoy our lives without your constant problems. I've been supporting my parents financially since they took early retirement. 3 years ago, every month. Without fail, I sent them $2,500 to help with their mortgage and expenses. Even after James died, I did it out of love and duty, believing family should support each other. How foolish I was, as my tears fell silently onto the hospital blanket. Lily gently squeezed my shoulder, the phone, her eyes full of sympathy. "Olivia's on the line," she said softly. The room felt suffocating, and the weight of years of neglect pressed down on Margaret's chest. She inhaled deeply, trying to brush aside the despair. Could she really leave everything behind? "Margaret, it's Olivia. How are you holding up?" The warmth in her friend's voice was a stark contrast to the cold detachment she'd felt from her family. Margaret's fingers trembled on the phone. Would Olivia answer the unspoken question? Could she truly walk away from the family she had fought so hard to belong to? As the memories flickered in her mind, like a broken film reel, Margaret felt her heart race. Moments of shattered childhood echoed painfully back. The laughter of her birth class, where she had shared joy with others while her parents barely acknowledged her presence. Would she survive this betrayal? She had poured herself into her family, giving them everything while they gave back so little. Each sacrifice echoed, amplifying her desperation. The familiar scent of rain drifted through the open window, a reminder that change was coming. But could she find the courage to embrace it, even with the uncertainty looming? "Margaret." Olivia's voice broke through her swirling thoughts. "You need support now more than ever. You're not alone in this. You can reclaim your life." Tears brimmed in Margaret's eyes, blurring the reality around her. She had always believed family included unconditional support, but now, standing on this shaky precipice, could she truly rebuild the shattered pieces of her family? "Will anyone care for my children like I do?" she thought, wrestling with the possibility that she might lose them to the indifference she had known all her life. The future seemed uncertain, and Margaret had no idea if she was making the right choice. The only reality was the excruciating pain in her abdomen and the hope of something better on the horizon. Could she muster the strength to break free, to find her place in a world that had always made her feel invisible? And if she could escape this cycle, would her children thrive in a healthier environment? Just then, a flicker of determination sparked within her. The fight wasn't over. She could confront her fears. She had to believe it was possible. Would it be enough to mend the ties that had long been broken? As silence enveloped the room, she took a deep breath. The choice was hers to make. News that my friend Olivia would arrive in less than an hour had me holding my breath. Thank goodness for her. She was a natural with kids. "You're golden," Lily had said, assuring me of Olivia's skills from her time working with trauma victims at the Children's Hospital. "She'll take great care of the twins." Still, a familiar worry gnawed at me. "How much is this going to cost?" I asked, my voice trembling under the weight of mounting medical bills. James's insurance barely scratched the surface. "Don't stress about that right now," Lily replied, her tone steady like an anchor amid my storm. "Let's focus on you." But I couldn't. My mind raced to the $2,500 I had planned to transfer to my parents next week. Did they really need it? The thought ignited a flame within me, a spark of self-preservation that had dimmed for too long. When Olivia stepped into the room, she was everything Lily promised: kind, professional, effortlessly engaging with Ben and Sophie. As the hospital staff wheeled me toward the surgery, I grasped onto a decision with shaking hands. "Could you bring me my phone, just one last time?" I managed to ask Lily before they rolled me into the operating room. Once it was in my grasp, I sent out 2 messages. The first, a cancellation of all future automatic transfers to my parents. The second was blunt and honest. "I will no longer be providing financial support. My children and I deserve better than being your afterthoughts. Don't contact me again." As they wheeled me away, a strange sensation washed over me, mingling with my fear. Freedom. The surgery succeeded, though I woke up feeling weaker than I expected. 5 long days in the hospital slipped by in and out of consciousness, but my heart was buoyed by Olivia's unwavering presence. She stayed with the twins during the day and took them home at night. In one of the rare moments I surfaced from the haze of medication, I noticed my phone blinking with alerts. I squinted at the screen. 27 missed calls, countless texts from my like. The harsh scent of antiseptic clung to the air, a constant reminder of where I was. There, I lay in my hospital bed, memories swirling around like gray smoke, haunting but familiar faces of family flickering through my mind. I could hear the distant beeping of machines, a backdrop to the muffled shouts echoing from just down the hall about money. Always money. The ache in my heart wasn't just from surgery. It was the weight of my parents' neglect pressing down on me. All I wanted was a simple, "How are you, Margaret?" Instead, I was left feeling invisible. Did they even think of me? In that sterile room, all I craved was warmth and understanding. I was alone. Truly alone. Days rolled by in a haze of medications and blurred visions. My phone lit up with missed calls, 27 to be exact, messages from my parents and Rachel. Confusion, anger, and desperate pleas about bills clouded their frantic texts. Not once did they check on my well-being or ask about the twins. My father's final message struck me cold. "You can't just cut us off like this. We've got a cruise planned." They'd woven a false narrative for Rachel, downplaying my emergency. That stung. Taking a deep breath, I texted Rachel the truth while still drifting in and out of consciousness. Her response came swiftly. "Oh my God, Margaret! I had no idea. They said you were being dramatic. I would have watched the kids." Relief washed over me. Rachel wasn't intentionally cruel. She just hadn't been taught to put others first. Maybe now she'd see my parents clearly. By the time I was discharged, I made some bold decisions. I hired Olivia part-time for the twins, someone who genuinely cared. I contacted a lawyer to draft a will, designating a trusted friend as guardian for the twins should anything happen to me. Certainly not my parents. And, most critically, I blocked my parents' numbers, allowing Rachel limited contact only to assess her sincerity. This was my moment of awakening. The monthly $2,500 I'd been feeding into my parents' demands represented nearly a third of my income as a graphic designer. Without that burden, I could finally afford real child care and maybe even rebuild the shattered remnants of our emergency fund after James's death. That night, as I lay in my own bed, the comforting weight of the twins nestled beside me, I felt a flicker of hope begin to blossom, a quiet triumph over the chaos that had long defined my life. In their room across the hall, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was guilt, the ingrained feeling that I was somehow wrong for putting myself and my children first. There was fear about managing recovery while caring for two toddlers, but there was also an unfamiliar sense of self-respect taking root. My phone pinged with a text from Rachel. "I just had a huge fight with Mom and Dad about how they treated you. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. Can we talk tomorrow?" Maybe I wasn't completely alone after all. 2 weeks after my surgery, I was slowly regaining my strength. The incision site still throbbed painfully when I moved too quickly, but I was managing better each day. Olivia had been a godsend, arriving each morning to help with the twins. While I worked from home, my graphic design clients had been surprisingly understanding about my limited availability, and I was grateful for the remote work that allowed me to stay close to my children. Rachel had visited twice, bringing healthy meals and spending time with the twins. Our conversations were cautious at first, but eventually she opened up about her own experiences with our parents. "They always made it seem like you were choosing to distance yourself from the family." She admitted one evening as we watched the twins play, "I never realized they were pushing you away. I was beginning to see a new side to my sister, one that had been hidden beneath years of our parents' manipulation while I wasn't ready to completely trust her. Yet, I appreciated her efforts." Then came the knock at the door I had been half expecting through the peephole. I saw my parents standing in the hallway. My Margaret Carter's mom was clutching her designer purse nervously, while my father stood with his arms crossed, familiar, impatient patience etched on his face. I hesitated, heart pounding before opening the door, just enough to speak through the gap. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "Natasha, darling, we've been so worried my Margaret Carter's mom began, the two of you have treated me." The tension was palpable, a living thing in that cramped hallway. I could hear the distant sound of rain tapping lightly against the window, a soothing reminder that the world outside moved on, indifferent to our chaos. My heart raced. Did they even realize the depth of my wounds? Or was their world so cocooned they couldn't feel my pain? Margaret Carter's mom stood there, her sugary tone sharpening with each word. "You haven't been answering our calls. We just want to know you and the twins are all right." "Fine," I shot back, my voice cooler than I intended. "Now, if that's all—" "It's not all," my father interjected, his tone slicing through the air. "We need to talk about this financial situation." His words washed over me, a tidal wave of disbelief. They were miles from understanding. "I told you I'm cutting financial ties," I insisted, clenching my fists. "Sweetie," my Margaret Carter's mom's voice was pleading, almost a melody rising in pitch. "We've come to rely on that money." I felt the walls close in. "Rely?" I echoed, incredulous. "You chose concert tickets over watching your grandchildren during my surgery." Silence enveloped us. Their expressions were chiseled stone, hardened by years of selfish choices. "That was one mistake," my Margaret Carter's mom murmured, her words dripping in regret. "This isn't punishment, Mom. This is consequence." Calmness washed over me as I stood my ground. My life had been a quest for their approval, but in my darkest hour, they had turned their backs. "I'm a parent, too," I said, "and I'd never treat Ben and Sophie the way you've treated me." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Their denial stung, like rain hitting a weary ground, making old wounds ache anew. I watched them recoil, their shock painting their faces. How could they refuse to see the truth? The fight for my identity, my children's well-being, unfolded before us like a storm gathering strength. Their expectations suffocated me. Yet in claiming my power, I felt a flicker of hope igniting within. Felt like a punch to the chest. I read my father's message twice, then once more, just to be sure I wasn't imagining it. Words like ungrateful, abandonment, and after all we've done for her, burned on the screen. He had copied everyone, cousins I hadn't seen in years, distant relatives who barely knew me, even Aunt Patty, who had just stood on my porch begging for peace, the man who once held me as a baby, now painting me as the villain in a story I didn't write. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The rain outside had stopped, but the silence that followed was louder than the storm. The scent of wet pavement drifted through the cracked window. I stood in the kitchen, watching the twins play on the rug, their giggles soft, unaware of the emotional war unfolding just outside their world. And then, a knock. Not harsh, not demanding, just hesitant. I didn't move. I couldn't. My hands trembled. My heart thudded in my chest like it was trying to escape. I thought it would be my parents again. Or Aunt Patty. Maybe someone else from the ever-growing list of people trying to talk sense into me. But then I heard her. A soft voice, almost a whisper through the door. "Mommy?" "Sophie." I froze. She wasn't calling from the living room. She was on the other side of the door. How had I not noticed her slip out? My hand flew to the knob and I opened it just enough to see her, clutching her worn-out giraffe, bare feet on the doormat, eyes wide like tiny moons. "Are you still mad?" she asked, the words fragile, like a porcelain cup on the edge of a table. My throat tightened. "No, baby," I said, scooping her into my arms. "Never at you." She buried her face in my shoulder, and I held her there, tightly, like I needed her more than she needed me. In that moment, everything shifted. My fight wasn't about money. It wasn't even about my parents anymore. It was about her, about Ben, about the legacy I wanted to leave behind. Not one of guilt, silence, and obligation, but of truth, protection, and love. Because how could I teach them to stand up for themselves if I kept folding to the weight of family shame? That night, I sat on the floor beside their beds, listening to their even breathing. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the nightlight. I watched the rise and fall of their chests and thought about all the nights my own parents left me to cry, unheard, unseen. I wouldn't pass that silence down. The next day, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Aunt Patty. "You need to apologize. This is tearing the family apart." I stared at it for a long while. Then I typed one word. No. Not out of anger, out of clarity, because I finally saw it. The pattern. The manipulation masked as love, the obligation disguised as loyalty, and the years I spent twisting myself into someone they could approve of, someone who never quite measured up. But I wasn't that person anymore. Later that week, a cousin I barely knew replied to the group email chain. "Maybe Margaret's just setting boundaries. Ever think of that?" The silence that followed? Deafening. No more comments. No more guilt-drenched messages. Just quiet. For the first time in months, I felt peace settle in my chest like a warm blanket. Not because the storm had passed, but because I'd finally stopped standing in the rain, begging for shelter from people who had never built a roof for me. I'd built my own. And inside that home, with the echoes of Sophie's laughter and Ben's tiny footsteps, I found something my parents hadn't given me. A sense of safety, of self, of strength. So no, I wasn't the villain. I was the Margaret Carter's mom who finally chose herself, and in doing so, chose her children's future. Conveniently omitted their refusal to help with the twins during my emergency surgery, instead painting me as an ungrateful daughter who had suddenly cut them off without reason. What they hadn't anticipated was the backlash my cousin Michael, who lived near my parents, replied to the group. "Uncle Robert, didn't you just buy a new boat last month, and Aunt Diana, wasn't that a new diamond tennis bracelet you were showing off at Thanksgiving?" Other family members chimed in, many privately messaging me to ask for the full story. Even Aunt Patty called me directly after learning the truth. "I had no idea about your surgery." She admitted they told me you were just being dramatic about some routine procedure and using it to punish them financially. Meanwhile, Rachel had fully taken my side after witnessing our parents' behavior first. And she helped me craft a single factual response to the family email thread, simply stating I recently underwent emergency surgery with a significant risk of complications. My parents refused to watch my children during tour this time because they had concert tickets. I am now focusing on my recovery and caring for my twins. Without additional stress, the support that followed was overwhelming. Cousin Michael's wife dropped off home-cooked meals. A second cousin I barely knew offered her services as a part-time babysitter, free of charge. Rachel started spending weekends at my apartment getting to know her niece and nephew while helping me recuperate. Most surprisingly, Lily from In the Hospital connected me with a support group for young widowed parents. Their first meeting was held via Zoom, so I could participate from home. And for the first time since James died, I felt truly understood by people who had walked my path. My parents' financial situation, meanwhile, deteriorated quickly. The phone call ended with an eerie silence. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just silence. Margaret Carter stood frozen in her kitchen, one hand gripping the counter, the other still holding the phone. The soft hum of the fridge felt deafening. Outside, the wind rustled dry summer leaves along the sidewalk. Inside, her world was narrowing by the second. The weight of the foreclosure news pressed down like a storm cloud. Her parents' house, gone in 60 days unless someone bailed them out. But that someone was supposed to be her. Again. From the living room, the sound of Sophie's giggle floated through the air, followed by Ben's tiny footsteps thudding against the wood floor. Their laughter cut straight through the tension. It was innocent, pure, a reminder of what mattered. But Margaret's heart pounded louder. Was this really happening? After everything, they still thought she'd cave? She could hear her Margaret Carter's mom's voice in that final message. We never thought you'd actually cut us off. What did they think this was? A tantrum? A bluff? They had no idea who she had become. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when Margaret would have wired the money before even hearing the full story. A time when guilt ran her life. When her parents' approval felt like oxygen. But that Margaret was gone. Rachel had discovered the truth about their finances. 2 mortgages, a boat, a vacation timeshare. All bought while Margaret was barely holding it together after James's death, while she was raising twins alone, recovering from emergency surgery. The scent of fresh coffee wafted through the air, but the tension that filled the room was almost suffocating. Margaret Carter's mind spiraled back to times filled with harsh words and dismissive gestures. Memories of her family's disapproval tightened in her chest. Every moment was a stark reminder that their toxic weight was something she had outgrown. Her focus was laser-sharp now. Her children needed a bright future, far from the haunting shadows of her past. As laughter drifted from the living room, where Sophie giggled and Ben's little feet pitter-pattered across the wood floor, Margaret felt a pang of guilt. Were these joyful sounds enough to drown out the chaos of her own life? Outside, the wind whispered secrets, rustling the leaves like an unwelcome guest, reminding her of what she had to confront. Just moments ago, a harsh silence lingered after a phone call, the kind of silence that clawed at her heart. Her parents expected her to be their savior, yet this time she felt unyielding. Was this really happening? She clenched her fists, recalling her mom's last words. We never thought you'd cut us off. Did they truly believe she'd cave, still trapped in guilt's unforgiving grip? Once, Margaret would have rushed to their aid, but that version of herself was a ghost now. She remembered when guilt ruled her life, when her parents' approval felt like a lifeline. Now, it felt like chains. Margaret had recently found a glimmer of hope in a support group, a place where she connected with other young widows fighting their own battles. Through them, she met Diana, a real estate agent who had also lost her partner to cancer. Diana inspired Margaret to consider selling her cramped apartment and moving to a more affordable neighborhood with better childcare options. She had even started a side business designing memorial websites, driven by the memory of her late husband, James. For the first time since his loss, she felt purpose beyond mere survival. The contrast between her personal growth and her parents' crumbling lives was startling. When they showed up unannounced, spreadsheets in hand, desperation was etched on their faces. We need $144,000 to catch up on the mortgage and avoid foreclosure, her father said, his authoritative tone tinged with urgency. The weight of their expectations hung heavily as they settled at her small dining table. What about selling the boat? She suggested, almost incredulous. It would be a loss, her father snapped back, the heat rising in his voice. Or the timeshare? She asked, hopeful yet skeptical. My Margaret Carter's mom interjected swiftly, We've tried. The market is terrible. Those are our retirement luxuries. Luxuries? Margaret almost laughed. Luxuries you can't afford? The absurdity hung in the air, charged with unspoken truths. Truths that felt like a battle between survival and obligation. Her father's tone turned hard and unforgiving, as if the roles had flipped. It's the least you could do after everything we've done for you. The words felt like daggers, prompting her to question everything. Was this the family she had always struggled to gain acceptance from? Or was it time to carve out her own path, free from the shadows of their expectations? What exactly have you done for me? The question left my lips so softly. It almost didn't sound like mine around me after learning the full story. Even my father's sister, who had always taken his side in family disputes, called to express her support after hearing about their refusal to help during my surgery. Meanwhile, my own situation had improved dramatically. Diana, from my support group, had helped me find and purchase a small 3-bedroom house in a family-friendly neighborhood. The mortgage payments were actually less than my apartment rent had been, and the twins had a backyard to play in for the first time in their lives. My side business designing memorial websites had grown enough that I could reduce my graphic design clients and focus on work that felt meaningful. Olivia still helped with childcare 3 days a week, but I'd adjusted my schedule to maximize time with Ben and Sophie. Most importantly, I'd found a community neighbors brought casseroles when we moved in. The support group organized play dates. Rachel had become a genuine sister rather than a competitor for our parents. Affection even Lily from the hospital. Occasionally stopped by with her children. I had lost my late husband and cut ties with my parents. Yet somehow I felt less alone than ever before. 6 months after my surgery, I received a letter, an actual handwritten letter from my Margaret Carter's mom. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. Inside was something I'd never seen before. A genuine apology. I've had time to reflect on my behavior. She wrote, Watching you build a life without our help has forced me to confront some painful truths about myself as a Margaret Carter's mom. I was jealous of your independence, your resilience. I resented that you didn't seem to need me the way I needed my own. Margaret Carter's mom. But now I see that you did need me. Just not in the ways I wanted to be needed. When you asked us to care for the twins during your surgery, you were reaching out, and we failed you completely. I'm deeply sorry. The letter continued explaining how they had completely restructured their finances. My father had taken a part-time. Margaret Carter sat at her kitchen table, staring at the letter, her fingers trembling. She unfolded the paper with care. The faint scent of her Margaret Carter's mom's old perfume wafted through the air, a bittersweet reminder of childhood. As she read, dread clawed at her heart. What began as an apology morphed into a desperate plea for connection. But it wasn't the words that sent shivers down her spine. It was the signature. Margaret gasped. Her Margaret Carter's mom had never signed her name this way before. Could this be real? Or was there something darker hiding in the shadows? The last 6 months had changed everything for Margaret. The twins, Ben and Sophie, now had a backyard to play in, a small 3-bedroom house that felt like home. Thanks to Diana, her support group friend, she was thriving despite the loss of her late husband and parents. Neighbors brought casseroles. Playdates flourished. Rachel, her old rival for their parents' affection, became more of a true sister. Amid the chaos, Margaret found herself less alone than ever. But then came the letter. A handwritten note that stopped her in her tracks. I've had time to reflect on my behavior, it read. Her Margaret Carter's mom confessed how jealousy and guilt had molded their tumultuous relationship. The words cut deep, but as she read between the lines, Margaret wondered, was this true remorse, or simply a new manipulation? Days passed before she shared the letter with Rachel. "They've been talking about writing to you for weeks," Rachel said, her tone skeptical. "Dad wasn't on board at first, but he had a heart scare last month. That changed things." Concern flickered through Margaret. "Heart scare?" she pressed. "Just high blood pressure and chest pains," Rachel replied. "But it scared him. He's on medication now, actually following doctor's orders." That revelation tugged at Margaret's heartstrings. Has facing mortality humbled him? But responding to the letter felt daunting. Was this genuine change, or just another tactic? She spent that night poring over old family photos, the smiling faces hiding a web of complexities. Her parents had always worn masks, playing the roles of the perfect family while prioritizing their own needs. Finally, a year after her surgery, Margaret agreed to meet them at a cafe. She didn't recognize the couple who walked through the door. Her father seemed diminished, his once commanding presence replaced with vulnerability. Her Margaret Carter's mom, no longer draped in designer clothes, appeared grounded and humble. The twins were safe with Rachel, allowing this tense moment to unfold without pressure. Awkward silence enveloped the table until something unexpected happened. Her father broke down. "I've been a terrible father." His voice cracked, laden with regret. "And an even worse grandfather." Margaret felt a shift inside her. Was this the moment of truth? Her Margaret Carter's mom reached out, fingers hovering just above Margaret's hand, suggesting a connection. "We've spent months in therapy," she admitted, her eyes pleading for understanding. In that moment, the pain of the past began to dissolve, making way for something new. Could forgiveness be on the horizon? In a world where family ties often come with strings, Margaret Carter faced a daunting challenge. She stood at the crossroads of old wounds and the desire for a fresh start. As she gathered the courage to share snapshots of her twins, her pride, her joy, she felt an unusual calm wash over her. Would her parents finally listen? "You've grown so much," her father murmured, his voice a crackle of vulnerability. For possibly the first time, he wasn't demanding or blaming. It felt surreal breathing in that moment, like the scent of rain on dry pavement, a promise of renewal. But could this change be real, or was it just another mask? As Margaret wrapped up her stories, she made her boundaries clear. "If you truly want to know my children, it starts with respect for their Margaret Carter's mom." Each word felt like a protective shield. As she walked away, the bitterness that had clung to her for years lifted. She was now not just a daughter seeking approval, but a fierce Margaret Carter's mom committed to her children's well-being. In that stillness, Margaret felt the surge of empowerment. The past no longer defined her. Her strength and love stood tall. Would her parents rise to meet this new chapter? The future remained a question, but she faced it with a resilience born of love.